Racist cops arrested a black woman at rest stop. Next day, she's their judge in court. The cuffs snapped shut louder than they should have. They weren't supposed to, not on someone like her, not on someone who'd sworn to uphold justice. But that didn't matter now, not to the two white state troopers who had her pressed against the back of a black rental SUV in a dusty rest stop just outside Mason County, Indiana. "Put your hands where I can see them," Officer Troy Maddox barked, yanking her arms behind her back so forcefully it made her wince. Alana Pierce didn't resist. She didn't scream or argue. She stood tall in her charcoal sweatsuit and white Nikes, calm and composed. The quiet tension in her jaw said more than words ever could. "Do you even know who you're arresting?" she asked, voice low but clear. "Yeah," Maddox sneered. "A suspicious woman loitering at a rest stop in a stolen SUV." A silence followed. His partner, Officer Claire Bannon, shifted awkwardly, eyes darting between Maddox and Alana. She looked young, maybe mid-20s, too green to question orders, too scared to speak up. Alana's lips barely moved. "That vehicle's registered to the U.S. government. There's a binder in the glove compartment. You didn't even check, did you?" Maddox rolled his eyes. "I don't care if it's registered to the Pope. You matched the description we got. Black, mid-40s, dark SUV parked too long." Alana blinked once. "That's all it takes to get handcuffed now." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The few bystanders at the rest stop, a college student sipping iced coffee, an older white man walking his German shepherd, watched with cautious curiosity. The student pulled out her phone and hit record. The man shook his head slowly, muttering something under his breath. 10 minutes earlier, Alana had been sitting behind the wheel, reviewing notes for a private judicial summit she was due to attend in Chicago. She had taken this route deliberately, avoiding attention. No security detail, no pomp. Just peace, quiet, and a moment to breathe. She was a federal judge, after all, or so she thought that title still meant something. But now she was another statistic in a country where identity can be a weapon used against you. "Officer, I am requesting to contact my office," Alana repeated firmly. "You'll get your one call," Maddox snapped, "at the station." And just like that, she was shoved into the back of a cruiser. She caught one last glimpse of her briefcase still resting on the front seat, her federal credentials tucked just inside it, irrelevant, unread, unseen. Inside the vehicle, the world outside passed in a blur of trees, asphalt, and disbelief. Her heart didn't race, her pulse stayed steady, but her thoughts swirled, not because she was afraid, because she was calculating, because she knew exactly what this was, and because she already knew how it would end, just not for her. Back at the precinct, things moved quickly on paper, but slowly in reality. Alana was booked like anyone else. No name recognition, no deference. She offered her ID. They didn't check it properly. She explained again that she was en route to a classified legal summit. No reaction. When she asked to speak with her office for the third time, Officer Bannon looked visibly uneasy. "I don't think she's lying," Bannon murmured to Maddox in the hallway, her voice barely above a whisper. Maddox waved her off. "You're too soft. They all say they're someone important." "She's not like the others," Bannon replied, eyes flicking back to the holding room where Alana sat upright, expression unreadable. Maddox snorted. "They never are, until the cuffs go on." An hour passed, then another. No phone call, no charges, no Miranda warning, even. Alana sat alone in a cold plastic chair, wrists aching, her long natural curls slightly frizzy from the humidity. She didn't look like a threat. She looked like someone who had spent a lifetime becoming untouchable, only to be reduced in 10 minutes flat by two men with badges and assumptions. Outside, the viral storm had already begun. The college student's video hit Twitter first. Black woman arrested for sitting in a car at rest stop. She didn't even raise her voice. By the time it reached TikTok, her face had become a symbol. Calm, defiant, yet weary. The comment sections lit up. Why didn't they check her ID? She looks like a professor. She looks like my mom. The silence in her demeanor haunted people. It was the silence of someone who had seen this before, who knew better than to raise her voice, because raising your voice while black could be interpreted as resisting. By the time the precinct's shift supervisor, Sergeant Deborah Sloan, arrived, the video had already amassed over 300,000 views. "Who's the woman in holding?" she asked, walking through the lobby, coffee in hand. Maddox shrugged. "Loiterer, might have stolen the SUV. We're running it now." Sloan frowned. "Why isn't she booked?" "She's playing the important card, claims she's a judge." Sloan froze. "What did you say?" "Federal judge or something. She wouldn't stop talking about how we're making a mistake." Sloan set her coffee down without taking a sip. "What name?" "Pierce. Alana Pierce." Sloan's eyes narrowed. She strode to the nearest computer and typed it in. The result popped up in less than 10 seconds. Judge Alana Pierce, U.S. Federal Bench, appointed 8th District, former civil rights litigator. Harvard Law. Sloan's stomach sank. She didn't wait. She turned and marched straight to holding. Alana looked up as the door opened. Sloan entered, composed but pale. "Ms. Pierce, or should I say Judge Pierce?" Alana didn't gloat, didn't even smile. She just nodded once. "Yes, I am sincerely sorry for what has happened here," Sloan said. "You should be," Alana replied coolly, "and not just for me." Behind Sloan, Maddox's voice rang out down the hallway. Wait, what did she say?" Sloan turned to him, her voice sharpening. "You arrested a sitting federal judge, without cause, without running her name, and without reading her rights." Maddox froze. "That can't be right. She didn't look." He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. The silence that followed was more damning than anything he could have said. Alana stood slowly, brushing imaginary dust from her sleeves. "I'd like to speak to my office now," she said, "and I'd also like your assurance that every second of this is documented for the record." Sloan nodded stiffly. "Yes, Your Honor." Outside the precinct, the world had already changed. The hashtags had already begun trending. The reporters were already on their way. And tomorrow, the courtroom would see a different kind of justice. The kind that walked in wearing the robe. The courthouse buzzed louder than usual that morning. Phones rang off the hook. Security walked a little straighter. The staff spoke in low voices, sneaking glances at their inboxes and phone screens. The video had officially crossed 2.5 million views overnight. But none of that mattered to Alana Pierce as she stepped through the side entrance in a navy blue suit and low heels, flanked by silence. Her gait was steady, her face unreadable. She had been here hundreds of times, on high-profile cases, in emotionally charged hearings, on mornings with bomb threats and protesters outside, but never like this. Because this time, she wasn't just a judge. She was the story, and she was about to walk into her own courtroom, presiding over a misconduct review that would include 2 officers she had encountered less than 24 hours ago. She paused before the courtroom doors, exhaled, and pushed them open. Inside, the mood shifted immediately. Everyone rose, not because they had to, because they didn't dare not to. Alana moved past the prosecution bench, past the rows of press cameras, and past Officer Troy Maddox and Officer Claire Bannon, who sat at the defense table looking like they had aged a decade since yesterday. Maddox stared at the floor. His hands were clenched tight in his lap. Bannon's eyes flicked upward just long enough to meet Alana's gaze, then immediately dropped again. "Be seated," Alana said, her voice cool and commanding. She adjusted her chair slightly, looked over the docket, and let the silence hold for an extra breath. "In this courtroom," she began, "we evaluate facts, behavior, and consequences, not appearances, assumptions, or biases. The first witness was called Sergeant Deborah Sloan. She testified firmly, laying out the timeline of events, the arrest, the failure to confirm identity, the body cam footage that contradicted the officer's initial written statements. Alana watched, listened, made notes. She didn't flinch. She didn't look at the officers. She didn't need to. The facts did the speaking. Then the body cam footage was played. It was worse than most had expected. The footage showed Maddox approaching Alana with a condescending smirk, ignoring her when she offered identification. It captured his words exactly. "You people always have a story." When the video ended, no one said a word. But the silence was deafening. Bannon was called next. She looked younger than she had the day before, somehow smaller. Her hands trembled as she raised her right hand and swore in. Alana fixed her with a calm, unwavering gaze. "Officer Bannon, did you at any time verify my identity through official channels?" "No, Your Honor." "Did you request backup before placing me under arrest?" "No, ma'am." "Why not?" Bannon hesitated. "Because Officer Maddox told me we had probable cause, and I didn't think I could overrule him." "Do you believe that now?" Bannon looked down, then back up. "No, I don't." A few murmurs stirred in the back of the courtroom. Reporters scribbled faster. The prosecutors exchanged quick glances. Then came the twist. Alana's clerk entered from a side door and handed her a sealed envelope. She opened it slowly, scanned its contents, and tapped her pen on the desk twice. "Before we continue," she said, "this court has received a sworn affidavit from an anonymous whistleblower within the department." The entire courtroom stilled. Alana read aloud. The statement described a pattern of profiling incidents involving Officer Maddox, 4 prior complaints of excessive force against people of color at rest stops. 2 of those cases had mysteriously vanished from internal records. Maddox turned pale. He shot a glance at Bannon. She didn't meet his eyes. "Is this accurate?" Alana asked. Maddox leaned forward, lips tight. "That's not admissible." "I didn't ask about admissibility," she interrupted. "I asked if it's true." He didn't answer. The room tensed as Alana continued. "This court has also received a digital log, verified by the county's internal affairs unit, that shows your access card was used to alter record entries last November." More whispers. Alana raised a hand to still the noise. "This isn't just about yesterday. This is about a pattern of abuse hidden behind a uniform. This courtroom will not be used as a shield. It will serve as a mirror." Maddox slumped in his chair. The energy in the room had shifted again. People weren't just watching justice. They were witnessing accountability. And Alana Pierce was the one delivering it. She called a 10-minute recess, retreating to chambers with her clerk, leaving the courtroom abuzz. Outside, protesters gathered. Inside, journalists typed frantically. Officer Maddox wiped sweat from his brow and leaned into Bannon, whispering urgently. But Bannon shook her head. "No," she whispered back. "I'm not going down for you." She stood up, walked to the bailiff, and asked to speak with the prosecution during recess. When court reconvened, the atmosphere was electric. Because now, there was more than a misconduct hearing. There was a full-scale investigation. And Judge Alana Pierce wasn't just the woman in the video anymore. She was the one writing the final chapter, and remembered every name on every badge. The media vans lined the street outside the courthouse by dawn, their satellite dishes aimed skyward like watchtowers. Inside, security had doubled. Reporters huddled near the front steps, trying to get a glimpse of anyone connected to the case. Headlines were already flying across social media. Judge in viral arrest case presides over her own hearing. But Alana Pierce didn't read headlines. She read patterns. And something about Claire Bannon's last-minute shift in court yesterday had cracked a door open that Alana wasn't about to let close. In her chambers that morning, Alana reviewed the whistleblower affidavit again. The language was precise. Too precise. This wasn't some emotional dump from an angry colleague. It had structure, legal familiarity. Her clerk, Vanessa, knocked twice and entered. "You asked for Bannon's updated statement?" Alana nodded and took the file. She flipped through it slowly and stopped on page 3. "She gave them the names," Alana said, almost to herself. "Other victims, and one of them was never even fought." Vanessa hesitated. "Should we forward it to the AG?" "Not yet," Alana said. "Not until we have something that connects Maddox directly to the suppression of those complaints." Vanessa closed the door behind her. Alana stood alone in her office, her reflection staring back at her from the window, composed but not unmoved. This wasn't just a review anymore. This was a reckoning. When the courtroom doors opened at 10:30 a.m., it was standing room only. Alana took her seat at the bench. She looked over at the defense table. Maddox was there, but something had changed. He looked deflated, no longer defensive, just waiting. The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, the people call Officer Claire Bannon for further testimony." Claire approached the witness stand like someone carrying 1,000 pounds in her chest. She didn't look at Maddox. The oath was read. And then, "I need to correct my previous statement," she said clearly. "I wasn't just following orders. I knew what we were doing was wrong. I've known for a while." A quiet gasp rippled through the room. Alana leaned forward slightly. "Go on." "I've seen Officer Maddox alter reports. He's coached junior officers to use phrases like furtive movement or uncooperative to justify searches or detainments. I didn't speak up because I was afraid." Maddox's jaw twitched. "But yesterday," Bannon continued, "we arrested a sitting judge and still didn't stop to question ourselves. That's when I realized this wasn't about fear anymore. It was about accountability." Alana's face remained unreadable, but her eyes didn't waver. "Are you aware of any attempts to delete or alter formal complaints against Officer Maddox?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes, one in particular. A man named Marcus Taylor. His report disappeared after just one day. He claimed Maddox pulled him over at a rest stop and detained him without cause. Maddox laughed about it in the locker room afterward." Alana turned toward her clerk. "Subpoena Marcus Taylor," she said. "Today." Bannon stepped down. As she passed Maddox, he whispered something to her, low, sharp. She flinched, but didn't stop. Alana had seen enough. Court recessed for lunch, but the real heat was just beginning. Outside, protesters gathered with signs that read, "Believe her," and "Dismantle the blue wall." Inside, Maddox sat in the consultation room with his attorney, fuming. "She's trying to save herself," he spat. "She's scared. That's all this is." His lawyer, David Rollins, a gray-haired man who had spent 2 decades cleaning up messes like this, shook his head. "You need to understand something," Rollins said, voice low. "This isn't going away. And if they find evidence that you tampered with complaints, this goes federal. Minimum sentencing, no shield." Maddox stood up too fast, knocking his chair over. "No one's pinning this on me." "You did this to yourself," Rollins said calmly. "Now you better hope to hell Judge Pierce doesn't press it further." But Alana was already 5 steps ahead. By the time court resumed, Marcus Taylor had arrived. He was 33, wore a UPS uniform, and sat at the witness stand with both hands clasped tightly in front of him. Alana watched him closely. "Mr. Taylor, can you tell the court what happened on March the 4th of last year?" He nodded once, cleared his throat. "I stopped at the Halston rest stop around 8 p.m. I was driving home from a late shift. I grabbed coffee and got back in my van. That's when Maddox pulled up behind me, lights on." He paused. "I didn't know what I'd done wrong. He asked me what I was doing there. I told him, but he didn't believe me. He said I looked nervous, said that meant I was hiding something." Did he search your vehicle? Yes, without consent. He opened the back door and saw a bunch of packages and accused me of stealing. I kept telling him I was a delivery driver. He said, "We'll see what your story is after a few hours in holding." But I had my badge, my ID, my route printout. None of it mattered. What happened next? The prosecutor asked. He let me go, but he said, and I'll never forget it, next time try not to look so guilty. Like it was my fault for being scared. Alana felt her jaw tighten. Did you file a complaint? I did, the next day. But when I followed up a week later, I was told there was no record of it. Alana turned to Maddox. Officer Maddox, do you recall this interaction? Maddox shifted. I recall stopping a vehicle matching that description, yes. Did you enter any data or reports into the system after that stop? He hesitated. I don't remember. You don't remember inputting a report after detaining a man for 40 minutes? No, he said flatly. Alana looked at the screen in front of her. Her clerk had pulled internal system records. There's a log entry showing your access card was used to modify an entry at 9:37 p.m. the same night, she said. Does that refresh your memory? Maddox's silence said everything. Alana leaned back. Then let me refresh it for you. You erased that man's complaint, and then you did it again, and again. The courtroom fell into stunned silence, and then Alana stood. This review will now be upgraded to a formal disciplinary tribunal. Officer Maddox, you are hereby suspended without pay, pending criminal investigation for misconduct, falsification of records, and civil rights violations. Maddox looked stunned. His attorney said nothing. And as Alana exited the courtroom, press cameras flashing, the story that had begun with a viral video took a sharp, irreversible turn. Justice wasn't just circling, it had landed. The courtroom buzzed like a broken engine, low murmurs, sidelong glances, and the tension of people knowing they were about to witness something that would either redefine justice or expose its limits. Judge Alana Pierce had transformed from a name in a headline to a symbol of power, staring injustice dead in the face. And she wasn't done. But this wasn't just about Officer Maddox anymore. Not since the night before, when an unmarked envelope had been slid under her hotel room door at 2 a.m. Inside, she'd found two things: a USB drive and a short note that read, "Start with the report from February 3rd. Then check the dash cam." That morning, Vanessa uploaded the contents, the screen filled with time-stamped files, some audio, some video. Alana's stomach tightened as she clicked on the first one. The footage showed Maddox and two other officers pulling over a teenage boy for a supposed lane violation. Within seconds, the boy was yanked from the car, his screams muffled under the weight of three grown men. She clicked the next. It got worse. By the fourth video, Maddox's pattern was undeniable. Pretextual stops, escalation, no cause, no paperwork, all black drivers, all alone. But what broke her was the final clip. A young girl, barely 16, was handcuffed in front of her sobbing mother. Maddox's voice was loud and mocking. "If you don't raise your kids right, the system will do it for you." That was the moment Judge Alana Pierce stopped being a judge. She became a crusader. By the time she took the bench later that morning, the lines in her face seemed sharper, her eyes steelier. "Today's hearing will include additional evidence submitted through anonymous sources," she announced. "Let the record show this material has been authenticated and tied to Officer Maddox's badge and patrol logs." Gasps and camera flashes filled the room. Maddox's lawyer rose to object, but Alana cut him off. "Sit down, Mr. Rollins. You'll have your chance." The lights dimmed as Vanessa queued up the first clip. The room watched in stunned silence as the abuses unfolded, one video after another. By the end of the third, one juror actually stood and excused herself to the restroom, clearly shaken. Alana looked toward Maddox, whose hands clenched white against the defense table. "I'd like to remind the court, Alana said, that the victims in these videos were never charged with a crime, nor were any formal reports filed. Rollins finally stood again. Your Honor, while disturbing, these are unverified accounts. They're verified, Ed, Alana snapped. Every clip matches logged GPS locations and timestamps tied to Maddox's cruiser. Are you saying someone fabricated all of that too? Rollins sat back down slowly. Then came the twist. I would like to call a new witness, Alana said. Ms. Evelyn Harmon, former records technician for the Halston Police Department. Heads turned as an elderly black woman stepped forward. She walked slowly but with dignity, holding a folder. Ms. Harmon, Alana said gently, can you share what you discovered before your retirement? I can, she said, voice quivering. I worked in records for 24 years. About a year ago, I noticed an unusual pattern. Complaints with specific tags, racial profiling, excessive force, were being routed for review but never returned. When I flagged it to my supervisor, I was told it was above my pay grade. And who handled the rerouting? Evelyn looked directly at Maddox. Officer Maddox and Captain Reiner. Murmurs exploded across the courtroom. Maddox's jaw dropped. This was the first time another name had been connected to his operation. And why come forward now? Alana asked. Evelyn's eyes misted. Because I saw what they did to you, and I knew if even someone like you could be treated that way, none of us were ever really safe. The room went dead silent. Outside, social media erupted. Judge Pierce, #Halston. Cover up. Unseal the files. Then, unexpectedly, Maddox stood. No lawyer, no excuses? Alana asked coldly. He shook his head. No, I just have one thing to say. Everyone leaned forward. I wasn't working alone, Maddox said, and you damn well know it. Alana didn't flinch. Oh, I do. And by the time I'm done, so will the entire country, he smirked. You think you can bring the whole department down? No, Alana replied calmly. I don't think. I know. Maddox was escorted out in cuffs within the hour, his badge left behind on the courtroom floor. That night, Alana sat alone in her chambers, staring at the report from February 3rd again. Captain Reiner's name glowed from the page. The next domino had been found, and Alana Pierce was ready to push. The buzz from Maddox's confession hadn't faded. If anything, it had detonated a political earthquake across Halston County. Local networks were camped outside the courthouse. National journalists flew in by the hour. Overnight, Judge Alana Pierce went from anonymous jurist to headline warrior. But with the spotlight came danger. By 6 o'clock a.m. the next morning, her email inbox had over 200 unread messages, half of them support from people of all backgrounds, the other half laced with veiled threats and warnings. Back off, Judge. You're playing with fire. Don't go looking for things you're not ready to find. But Alana had never been afraid of fire. She had been raised in it. Growing up in rural Mississippi, her grandfather had been falsely accused of theft in 1962. The only evidence against him was a white man's word. No trial, no lawyer, just cuffs and silence. Her mother used to tell her that silence wasn't safety, it was surrender. So today she didn't flinch. In a private meeting room within the courthouse, Alana sat across from Vanessa, her law clerk, and a man she never expected to see again, Special Agent Devin Wells of the Department of Justice. He had been watching the case unfold and came with a briefcase and an ultimatum, until Alana herself addressed him. Lieutenant Hayes, did Captain Reiner ever instruct you to target individuals based on race during routine patrols? The courtroom held its breath. Hayes swallowed. His jaw twitched. He never said it outright. Alana leaned forward. But did he imply it? He nodded once. Yes. The murmur in the gallery was immediate. The defense objected, but Alana waved it off. We're here for truth, not pageantry. It was a subtle moment, but it shifted the entire dynamic. Hayes had cracked the door, and what came next blew it open. The prosecution played an audio clip. One from a squad car where Reiner was heard bragging about putting uppity types in their place. His voice laughed when another officer mentioned the rest stop incident involving Alana. Bet she won't mouth off again after a night in the pen, he said. You could have heard a pin drop. Alana kept her face still, but inside, a firestorm swirled. The audio was proof Reiner not only knew who she was, but mocked her arrest. It also confirmed the suspicion that this wasn't just bad policing. It was intentional, systemic. Reiner's attorney stood, trying to object again. This is inflammatory, Your Honor. Context matters. Alana cut him off. You're absolutely right. Context matters. And this context shows a pattern of abuse under your client's command. The trial recessed for a brief lunch. Alana stepped into her chambers and closed the door. Vanessa was already inside, pacing. They're panicking, she said. The mayor's office issued a statement, but it's vague. No mention of Reiner. Alana sat, rubbing her temples. That's because they're trying to contain the fire instead of extinguishing it. Vanessa lowered her voice. Maddox wants to testify. Alana's eyes snapped open. He says he has more. Emails, memos, even a directive from the police union encouraging aggressive enforcement to protect the town's image. Do we trust him? Alana asked. Vanessa hesitated. I don't think he's doing this for redemption. I think he's scared. Alana nodded slowly. Good. Fear is honest. That afternoon, Maddox took the stand. No badge, no uniform, just a plain suit and the look of a man who knew his time in the sun had ended. He cleared his throat before speaking. I was wrong. What we did to Judge Pierce wasn't a mistake. It was protocol. Because the system we operate in doesn't see women like her as equals. It sees them as threats. The room exploded. Some gasped. Others clapped. Alana banged her gavel for order. Maddox continued. Captain Reiner made it clear. Keep control. That meant harass, detain, intimidate. And if they pushed back, bury them in process. He turned to face Alana. I'm sorry, Judge, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. Reiner shot to his feet. He's lying. He's just trying to save himself. Alana's voice cut through the chaos. Sit down, Captain. You'll have your turn. But that turn never really came, because the next piece of evidence was a confidential HR file, an unsigned complaint written by a female officer years ago, detailing repeated racist jokes, forced overtime for Black and Latino officers, and a closed-door meeting where Reiner said, We need to remind folks who's in charge in this town. Her name was redacted, but Alana could see Evelyn stiffen in the gallery. She had written it, and no one listened. Until now. As the hearing closed for the day, Alana gave a final remark. This courtroom is not just a room with walls and wood. It is the last line between power and people. And today that line is holding. She glanced at Reiner. Barely. Outside, protests swelled. Reporters scrambled for statements. And back in her office, Alana looked at her reflection in the window. Tired, weathered, but undefeated. Tomorrow she would rule. And it wouldn't just be a verdict. It would be history. Alana stepped into courtroom 3B like a storm held inside a frame. The gallery was packed. Press, activists, lawyers, everyday citizens who never thought they'd witness this kind of reckoning in their lifetime. No gavel had dropped, yet every eye clung to her as though she were the only thing holding justice together. She adjusted her robe, ignoring the tension in her chest, and sat down behind the bench. Her voice didn't shake when she called the case number. State of Mississippi versus Captain Brian Reiner. The moment those words left her mouth, the courtroom seemed to tilt. Captain Reiner stood from the defense table with his attorney, smirking like the weight of the room couldn't touch him. But the air was different now. The usual arrogance in his posture came off as forced. His smile, calculated. Alana's eyes scanned the room until they landed on Evelyn Harmon, sitting in the third row, clutching her notepad like it was her only weapon. And next to her, Officer Ramirez nodded discreetly. Alana turned to Reiner's lawyer. "Call your first witness." It wasn't Reiner. Instead, they brought in Lieutenant Gordon Hayes, a longtime subordinate and, judging by his nervous glances, a man who had clearly been coached but still had enough conscience to sweat. Under oath, Hayes answered questions with surgical vagueness. "I can't recall. That may have been an internal matter. I wasn't in the loop on that." Until Alana herself addressed him. "Lieutenant Hayes, did Captain Reiner ever instruct you to target individuals based on race during routine patrols?" The courtroom held its breath. Hayes swallowed, his jaw twitched. He never said it outright. Alana leaned forward. "But did he imply it?" He nodded once. Yes, the murmur in the gallery was immediate. The defense objected, but Alana waved it off. "We're here for truth, not pageantry." It was a subtle moment, but it shifted the entire dynamic. Hayes had cracked the door, and what came next blew it open. The prosecution played an audio clip, one from a squad car where Reiner was heard bragging about putting uppity types in their place. His voice laughed when another officer mentioned the rest stop incident involving Alana. "Bet she won't mouth off again after a night in the pen," he said. You could have heard a pin drop. Alana kept her face still, but inside, a firestorm swirled. The audio was proof Reiner not only knew who she was, but mocked her arrest. It also confirmed the suspicion that this wasn't just bad policing. It was intentional, systemic. Reiner's attorney stood, trying to object again. "This is inflammatory, Your Honor. Context matters." Alana cut him off. "You're absolutely right. Context matters, and this context shows a pattern of abuse under your client's command." The trial recessed for a brief lunch. Alana stepped into her chambers and closed the door. Vanessa was already inside, pacing. "They're panicking," she said. "The mayor's office issued a statement, but it's vague. No mention of Reiner." Alana sat, rubbing her temples. "That's because they're trying to contain the fire instead of extinguishing it." Vanessa lowered her voice. "Maddox wants to testify." Alana's eyes snapped open. "He says he has more emails, memos, even a directive from the police union encouraging aggressive enforcement to protect the town's image." "Do we trust him?" Alana asked. Vanessa hesitated. "I don't think he's doing this for redemption. I think he's scared." Alana nodded slowly. "Good. Fear is honest." That afternoon, Maddox took the stand. No badge, no uniform, just a plain suit and the look of a man who knew his time in the sun had ended. He cleared his throat before speaking. "I was wrong. What we did to Judge Pierce wasn't a mistake. It was protocol, because the system we operate in doesn't see women like her as equals. It sees them as threats." The room exploded. Some gasped. Others clapped. Alana banged her gavel for order. Maddox continued. "Captain Reiner made it clear. Keep control. That meant harass, detain, intimidate. And if they pushed back, bury them in process." He turned to face Alana. "I'm sorry, Judge, but I couldn't stay silent anymore." Reiner shot to his feet. "He's lying. He's just trying to save himself." Alana's voice cut through the chaos. "Sit down, Captain. You'll have your turn." But that turn never really came, because the next piece of evidence was a confidential HR file, an unsigned complaint written by a female officer years ago, detailing repeated racist jokes, forced overtime for Black and Latino officers, and a closed-door meeting where Reiner said, "We need to remind folks who's in charge in this town." Her name was redacted, but Alana could see Evelyn stiffen in the gallery. She had written it, and no one listened. Until now. As the hearing closed for the day, Alana gave a final remark. "This courtroom is not just a room with walls and wood. It is the last line between power and people, And today that line is holding. She glanced at Reiner. Barely. Outside, protests swelled. Reporters scrambled for statements. And back in her office, Alana looked at her reflection in the window. Tired, weathered, but undefeated. Tomorrow she would rule. And it wouldn't just be a verdict. It would be history. The courtroom buzzed like a hive before dawn. Low murmurs, shifting papers, the sound of tight nerves rubbing against marble and law. Alana stepped behind the bench with her robe crisp and her chin high. But today, even she could feel it in her bones. This wasn't just another session. This was the reckoning. Outside, protesters lined the courthouse steps. Inside, every seat was taken. Local media had been granted access, but national outlets now occupied the back rows. This story had grown legs, and the entire country was watching. Not because it was new, but because, for once, justice had a name and a face that refused to be silenced. Alana adjusted her mic. We will now deliver the findings in the matter of Captain Brian Reiner and Officer Vincent Maddox. Across the room, Reiner sat still, but his knuckles had gone white against the defense table. Maddox, no longer in uniform, kept his gaze low. Evelyn Harmon sat nearby, this time not as a ghost of what could have been, but a witness who finally felt seen. The moment the panel entered, silence swallowed the room whole. Judge Jacobs, a seasoned federal judge brought in for neutrality, stood beside Alana. He spoke first. After careful review of testimony, physical evidence, body cam footage, and department records, the panel finds Captain Reiner and Officer Maddox to have acted in violation of multiple procedural and constitutional standards. He paused as the weight of the words landed. Skun, including unlawful detainment, abuse of authority, racial profiling, and falsification of official reports. Reiner's lawyer jolted to his feet. We object to the language. Jacobs didn't blink. Objection noted and overruled. Alana leaned forward, her voice cool but pointed. Let the record reflect that both officers knowingly engaged in conduct unbecoming of law enforcement and violated not only their oath, but the public trust. And then came the moment that hadn't been scripted. As such, she continued, this panel recommends not only immediate termination without pension, but the forwarding of these findings to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. A collective gasp swept the room. Even some officers in uniform shifted uncomfortably. Reiner's face cracked, not in rage, but in disbelief. For the first time, he looked like a man realizing the badge wouldn't protect him anymore. You can't do this, he barked. She can't do this. She's biased. She was involved. Alana stood up. Let me be very clear. You did this. You made the choice to escalate. You ignored procedure. You saw a black woman in a nice car and assumed she didn't belong. You let that bias guide your badge. You lied, she had said. And when given a chance to own it, you doubled down. Reiner tried to interject again, but his lawyer placed a hand on his arm, almost pleading. Brian, stop, please. Alana sat back down, her heart thudding, but steady. This wasn't revenge. This was responsibility. And it didn't end here. After the gavel fell, Evelyn stepped forward quietly. Judge Pierce, she said softly, thank you. Alana didn't smile. Instead, she reached for Evelyn's hand. Next time, she said, don't just write the complaint. Make sure someone hears it. Evelyn nodded, tears barely held back. I will. Later that day, the press swarmed the front steps. Flashes burst, mics pointed like weapons. But Alana stood firm. A young reporter from a local channel asked the question everyone was thinking. Judge Pierce, what do you say to those who think this only happened because you had power? Alana looked directly at the camera. I say they're right. There was a pause, then murmurs. But I also say that power shouldn't be the prerequisite for dignity. I got lucky. I had a title. I had visibility. But most people don't. She turned to the crowd, her voice rising. not in anger but conviction. This isn't just about me. It's about what happens when someone without a robe or a camera or a title is stopped at that same rest stop. This was never about status. It was always about truth. Another reporter asked, "And the department?" "They'll answer for their failure," she replied, "and we'll make sure it doesn't happen again." That night, back in her apartment, Alana sat on her balcony, looking out over the Mississippi River. The city lights shimmered below like soft echoes of the storm that had passed. Vanessa poured 2 glasses of wine and joined her. "You were brutal today," she said with a smile. Alana raised her glass. "I was fair." They clinked glasses in the warm night air. From inside, the TV still played coverage of the trial. Protesters were celebrating, not with fireworks or fire, but with chants. Signs reading, "Justice looks like this," and Alana Pierce, our judge, waved against the city skyline. And while she appreciated the support, Alana knew tomorrow the real work would begin, because the system might have cracked, but it hadn't collapsed, not yet. But tonight, at least, it had bent toward justice, and that was worth a moment of peace. The hearing room was nearly empty now. The crowd had gone, the cameras packed away, and the courthouse lights dimmed to their late-night glow. Yet, Judge Alana Pierce remained seated behind the bench, her gavel resting on the polished wood, her robe folded over one arm. Silence hung heavy, not with tension anymore, but with clarity. The kind of silence that comes after a storm passes, and all that's left is truth. Down the hall, echoes of footsteps and distant murmurs from custodians hinted that the building was shutting down. But Alana wasn't quite ready to leave. Not yet. Her phone vibrated, a text from Vanessa. "They aired your closing on national TV. You should see the comments. People are saying they've never felt more seen." Alana stared at the message for a moment, her chest tightening with a mix of pride and disbelief. She hadn't asked for this spotlight. She certainly hadn't planned on becoming a symbol. But here she was, a black woman once profiled at a rest stop, now the judge who held her arresting officers accountable, not with vengeance but with unshakable poise. She stood slowly, her heels tapping against the marble floor, and made her way toward the exit. But just before she reached the doors, a voice called out behind her. "Judge Pierce?" She turned. It was Captain Darnell Hughes, head of internal affairs for the state, tall, salt and pepper hair, and a no-nonsense presence. He extended a manila folder. "We just finished the review on Officers Maddox and Reiner. I thought you'd want to see it first." She took the folder, flipping it open. Her eyes scanned the summary. Maddox, suspended without pay, facing 3 separate civil suits, his previous record now under a reopened inquiry. Reiner, resigned before termination, under federal investigation for obstruction and civil rights violations. But what stood out most was the line beneath it. Recommendation, full statewide audit of all rest-stop-related stops in the last 5 years. Pattern analysis flagged. Alana looked up. "You're really doing it?" Hughes nodded. "You cracked it open. We just had to follow through." She closed the folder. "This isn't just about those 2 men." He exhaled. "We know." She handed the file back. "Then don't stop here." He nodded again, more slowly this time. "We won't." The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Judge turns tables on racist officers. Rest stop reckoning. How one black woman took down the system. From the bench. Alana Pierce, a name America will remember. But she didn't read them. Instead, Alana found herself back at the same rest stop off I-20, not out of nostalgia, but because something unfinished still tugged at her. She parked the same black sedan, stepped out, and stood near the picnic bench where it had all begun. A young black girl, no older than 9, looked up at her from a nearby table, watching curiously. The girl's mother noticed and quickly apologized. "I'm sorry, she saw you on the news." Alana smiled and knelt beside the girl. "Hey, what's your name?" "Jasmine," the girl said shyly. You want to be a lawyer one day? Alana asked. Jasmine shrugged. Maybe, but my teacher says it's hard. Alana leaned in and said softly, Everything worth doing is hard, but it's worth it. You hear me? Jasmine nodded. Before leaving, Alana walked to her trunk and pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. She wrote something inside the front cover, then handed it to the girl. For when you're ready, she said. Back in the car, Alana took one last look in the rearview mirror. Not at her face, but at everything behind her. The roadside, the memory, the injustice. Then she shifted the gear into drive. Later that evening, Alana appeared on a live stream. Not through a network, not for ratings, but through a simple feed hosted on a community platform. The thumbnail read, A Final Word from Judge Pierce. Thousands tuned in. She spoke directly, honestly. What happened to me shouldn't be normal. It shouldn't be expected. But I know that for many of you watching, it is. She paused. And I didn't win because I had power. I won because I used it the right way, not to punish but to correct, not to shame but to reveal. And I'm not done. She leaned closer to the camera. We need to build something better, together. You don't have to be a judge to demand justice. You don't have to wear a robe to be right. You just need to believe that truth matters, that dignity matters, that your story matters. She closed with one last sentence. If you believe that too, then stand with me, subscribe, share these stories. Let's make justice louder than silence. As the video faded, comments flooded in. Thank you for speaking for us. This is the energy we need. Subscribed, never stop. From now on, I believe we can win. And somewhere out there, in a small apartment with a cracked screen, Jasmine watched her hero speak, and she began to believe she could be one too.